All stories uploaded by Epic Yarn are works of fiction submitted by various contributors and subscribers. These narratives are crafted for entertainment and storytelling purposes, with no claims of factual accuracy or real-world events. Additionally, the images accompanying each story are generated using AI technology, designed to visually enhance the storytelling experience.
Chapter 1. Practice Makes Perfect. The alarm cut through the early morning silence like a blade. 5:12 a.m. John groaned, rolled over, and slapped it off. His dorm room was dark, except for the faint blue light sneaking through the blinds, just enough to remind him the pool was waiting. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face. Muscles tight from yesterday's sets. Not sore, he was used to sore, but tight like a spring that hadn't uncoiled. The National League trials were 8 weeks away, and coach wasn't letting up. Not that John wanted him to. He just needed to swim it out. Everything. He pulled on his hoodie, grabbed his gear, and stepped out into the crisp morning. Campus was still asleep, silent except for the soft click of his footsteps. The pool was already lit when he got there. And, of course, Charles was already in lane 4, cutting through the water like he had somewhere to be. John paused, watching him. Every stroke, clean. Powerful. Graceful in a way that didn't make sense for someone built like that. Charles had this wild, confident energy outside the pool, all jokes and charisma, but in the water? Total discipline. And John hated how good it looked. Charles popped up at the wall, water dripping off his short brown hair. He caught John's eye and grinned. "You're late." John smirked. "You're a psychopath." "That too." Charles pulled himself out, muscles flexing, skin glistening under the fluorescent lights. He shook out his shoulders and reached for his towel. "Coach gave me an early sprint set. Said I needed to work on my turns." "You? Work on anything?" John kicked off his shoes and started peeling off layers. Charles shrugged. "You've been gaining on me in the IM splits. Can't let you have the glory." John stepped onto the deck in his jammers. "That's cute. Don't flatter yourself, Denver." Charles winked. "I'm still the one with the prettier stroke." John raised a brow. "Prettier, huh?" Charles grinned wider, tossed his towel over his shoulder, and strutted past him. "Get in the water, JJ." JJ. Only Charles called him that. And John pretended not to like it, but it warmed something in his chest every damn time. The next 2 hours were hell in the best way. Sprint ladders, broken IMs, recovery drills, breath control sets. The kind of practice where your arms go numb, your brain shuts off, and all that's left is your body in the water. Charles kept pace with him the entire time. Every time John pulled ahead, Charles surged forward like a challenge. Every flip turn was a silent dare. Beat me. Try me. Catch me. It felt like foreplay. By the time they climbed out of the pool, both of them were panting, dripping, and half laughing with exhaustion. "Breakfast?" Charles asked, tugging on a t-shirt that clung to his damp chest. John hesitated. He should get started on that thermodynamics assignment. But then Charles gave him that look, casual, a little hopeful, like he was used to John saying yes. "Yeah," John said, grabbing his towel. "Your treat. Dream on." They hit the campus cafe, still in damp sweats, and took their usual table by the window. The coffee was crap, but the pancakes were decent, and Charles always ordered extra and never finished them. John always pretended to complain while stealing bites. "So," Charles said, flipping through his phone. "Beach this weekend?" John looked up. "Beach? You remember the beach, don't you? That thing with sand, water, no clocks?" He raised an eyebrow. "We haven't taken a day off in months. We've got trials. And we'll still have them after. Come on. Just us. Like we used to." John stirred his coffee, hiding his small smile. "You miss me or something?" Charles met his eyes, serious now. Always. There it was again, that flutter in his chest. Quiet. Annoying. Dangerous. He laughed it off, tossing a sugar packet at Charles. You're a menace. And you're an overthinker. John sipped his coffee, gaze lingering a little too long on Charles's lips as he licked syrup from them. He thought about all the things he wasn't saying. About how Charles always knew when to push and when to pull. How his presence was the one constant that calmed the noise in John's head. How part of him wanted that beach day more than he wanted to win anything. But instead, he said, "Yeah. Let's go." Charles smiled like he'd already won. And maybe, he had. Chapter 2, The Rival Meet. The air at the invitational meet was thick with chlorine, noise, and testosterone. Swimmers from 5 different universities crowded the deck, some stretching, others trying to intimidate with loud banter or muscle-flexing warm-ups. John didn't care. His focus narrowed to the water in front of him and the way it shimmered under the overhead lights. Still, he felt off. Not tired. Not sore. Just off. "Loosen up," Charles said, nudging him with an elbow. He wore that same cocky grin, even with his cap pulled low over his brow. "You look like someone kicked your puppy." John rolled his shoulders. "Just want to swim." "You'll kill it, as usual." "You always do." That was the thing. John didn't want to just kill it. He wanted to shut his brain off, drown the pressure, silence whatever tight ache had started building in his chest since their breakfast earlier that week. The beach day idea still floated in his mind like a warm, tempting escape. But he didn't trust escapes. They made him vulnerable. And when he was vulnerable, he made mistakes. He adjusted his goggles, muttered "see you at the wall," and stepped onto the block. The backstroke event was clean. John hit every turn sharp, finished first in his heat, and even beat his personal best. Coach pumped a fist from the sidelines. Teammates clapped his back. Charles wrapped an arm around him from behind, slick and half-naked, grinning like they both just won gold. "You looked hot in the water," Charles teased, breathless and close. John snorted. "You'd know." But the line between joking and something else was thinner now. That look Charles gave him lingered too long. And John's laugh was just a little too tight. That night, they all headed to a bar near the host school's campus, just to wind down. John wasn't in the mood, but Charles practically dragged him there with the promise of greasy burgers and terrible music. The bar was loud, dim, packed with college swimmers wearing team hoodies and too much cologne. John found himself nursing a beer, standing near the corner of the bar, scanning the room out of habit. That's when he saw him. Alex Williams. Rival swimmer. Backstroke. Big name. Even bigger ego, if you believe the gossip. He was leaning against a wall, beer in hand, dark eyes scanning the room lazily. When his gaze landed on John, something flickered. Recognition. Interest. Alex pushed off the wall and walked over. Well. J.J. Johnson. Thought I recognized those shoulders." John raised an eyebrow. "Alex." Alex grinned. He was taller than John remembered, lean, but built in all the right places. Messy dark hair, a sharp jaw, and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing everyone wants you. "Nice swim today. You looked smooth." "Thanks," John said, sipping his beer. "You didn't do so bad yourself." Alex chuckled. "Careful. Compliments like that'll get a guy excited." John smirked. "You came over here to flirt or talk splits?" Alex leaned in slightly, the air between them suddenly different. Thicker. "I came over because you looked like you could use some distraction." And god damn it, he was right. Because Charles was across the room, surrounded by teammates and laughing at something. And John was still standing here, fighting the heat in his chest and the war in his head. He looked back at Alex. That grin. That open invitation. That chance to forget, if only for a night. So John didn't answer. He just finished his beer, placed the glass down, and followed Alex out the back exit. The hotel room was too clean, too impersonal. The sex wasn't bad, Alex knew what he was doing. He kissed with tongue and teeth, and moved with practiced rhythm. His hands were rough where John wanted rough. His mouth was slick where John needed it to be. But halfway through, John stopped thinking about Alex altogether. He thought about Charles. How Charles smelled like ocean salt and sunblock. How his laugh warmed up a whole locker room. How he always met John's eye right before a race, not to wish him luck, but to tell him, "You've got this." He thought about Charles's hands, slightly calloused from training but gentle. His voice, rough from shouting across the pool deck. The way he never looked at John like he was just a teammate. John came with a bite of guilt caught in his throat. He didn't stay the night. He left before Alex could even ask, tugging on his hoodie and slipping out the door with his heart pounding like he'd just lost something he didn't know he had. Back at the hotel, he showered in the dark. Water running hot. Skin scrubbed raw. But it didn't clean the feeling. Didn't stop the image of Charles, waiting. Trusting. It didn't stop the whisper in the back of John's mind that said, "You fucked up." Chapter 3, Back to the Lane. The return bus ride to campus was quiet, half the team passed out with headphones in and pillows propped against the windows. John sat by the window, pretending to nap, eyes closed against the sharp guilt that hadn't left him since the hotel. He could still feel Alex's skin on his, even though he'd scrubbed himself clean twice already. And Charles was right next to him, headphones in, foot lightly tapping to whatever song he was listening to, arm resting too close on the shared armrest. His knee brushed John's now and then, casually, unintentionally. John didn't move. He wanted that contact. He hated himself for it. "Hey," Charles murmured, tugging out an earbud. "You good?" John opened his eyes. Blinked at him. "Yeah. Just tired." Charles looked at him a moment too long, long enough that John felt it in his spine. "You're never this quiet after a win." John forced a smile. "Guess I'm evolving." Charles gave a soft, amused snort and leaned his head back, closing his eyes again. "Let me know if you want to talk." John turned toward the window, jaw clenched. He did. God, he really fucking did. Back at practice, everything felt slightly off-kilter. The water didn't move the same. His timing was just a beat behind. He missed a flip turn and swallowed half a lung of chlorine. Coach raised an eyebrow from the deck, calling out times and corrections, but didn't single him out. Charles noticed. Of course he noticed. "You're swimming like someone dumped a brick in your shorts," Charles said after practice, panting as they toweled off in the locker room. John forced a laugh. "I'm just off today." "You've been off since the meet." He froze. Charles stepped a little closer, frowning now. "You sure you're okay?" John couldn't look at him. Not when his towel was still hanging loose around his hips, when water traced down his abs, when his hair was slicked back and made him look 10 times more dangerous. "I'm fine." Charles didn't believe it. You didn't have to be his best friend to hear the lie in that. But he didn't push. Just nodded and gave a tight smile. "All right. Let me know when you're not." The guilt clawed at John all day. Through class. Through lunch. Through staring at a blank notebook page during a group study session where Charles kept glancing at him, confused, like John had turned into someone else overnight. By evening, he couldn't take it anymore. He needed to get away from everyone. He laced up his shoes and went for a run through the city, past campus, past the lit-up bookstore where Charles used to drag him to broaden his brain. Past the coffee shop they always hit after Sunday practice. Past every street and spot that had Charles's laugh echoing in the back of his head. His legs were shaking by the time he hit the overlook above the field house. Wind cold against his flushed skin. Breathing hard. Alone. Except, he wasn't. "Thought I might find you up here." Charles's voice came from behind him, soft but clear. John turned, stunned. "How?" I've known you 4 years, Charles said simply. You always come up here when your head's a mess. John couldn't breathe. Not properly. Not with Charles walking toward him, hoodie pulled over his hair, looking serious and worried and stupidly good under the city lights. What happened? Charles asked, stopping in front of him. You're not okay. Just tell me. John swallowed. The words caught. He couldn't say I hooked up with someone else. He couldn't say I wish it had been you. He couldn't say I'm scared to lose you if I tell the truth. I needed a release, he said instead, voice low, ashamed. It didn't mean anything. Charles blinked. A beat passed. 2. His mouth opened, then closed. And then he laughed, just once. Not mean. Just small. Tired. You could have come to me. The words hit like a punch. What? You needed comfort? A release? Charles's voice cracked slightly. You really think I wouldn't have been there? John's heart pounded. I didn't want to risk. You already did. Silence. The kind that stretches between people who know each other too well to pretend anymore. I'm sorry, John said. Honest. Raw. I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't. Charles looked away. Jaw tight. You didn't tell me because you thought I'd hate you? I didn't tell you because I hate myself for it. Charles exhaled, slow. He stepped closer. Just an inch. John could feel the heat of him again. The safety. The ache. Then Charles said, quietly. I just needed to hear it wasn't because you didn't care. John looked up, eyes meeting blue. It wasn't, he said. It never was. Chapter 4, that night at the pool. It was almost 10 p.m. when Charles swiped his ID at the aquatic center door. The lights were low, just the glow from the pool illuminating the tiles in soft blue. Most of the team was already gone. Quiet like this, the place felt sacred, like a church made of water and tile and echoes. John was already in the far lane, cutting through the water with that same stormy precision he always had when his brain wouldn't shut off. Charles watched from the edge for a moment. Admired the way John's body moved, how clean his backstroke looked, how strong his legs kicked. It was instinct by now to notice these things. To know his friend's body almost better than his own. Only, it hadn't felt like just instinct in a long time. He peeled off his hoodie and joggers, pulled on his cap and goggles, and slid into lane 5. Cold water kissed his skin. He sank beneath the surface and let himself drift for a second, just breathing. He didn't need to swim. But he needed to be near John. When he surfaced, John was already swimming back toward the wall, water slicing clean over his shoulders. Charles kicked off, letting himself match the pace just behind. They swam lap after lap. Neither said a word. But the tension, Christ, it was loud. Eventually, John stopped at the wall and pulled his goggles to his forehead, breathing heavy. Charles rested beside him, arms draped over the lane line. Couldn't sleep? John didn't answer right away. Just nodded, jaw tight. They floated like that for a moment, water lapping between them. Then Charles nudged him lightly with his foot under the surface. You gonna tell me what's eating you, or do I have to dunk it out of you? John cracked the faintest smile. You could try. Charles grinned. Tempting. Silence again. But this time it held something different. A charge. You ever think about how different this could have all been? John asked suddenly, voice low. Charles blinked. How do you mean? If we hadn't both gotten scholarships here. If we ended up on different teams. If we'd never met. Charles swallowed. Yeah. Sometimes. And? I don't want to think about it. John turned to him, really looked at him. Green eyes darker in the low light. His face open in a way that made Charles want to reach out and touch it. I need to tell you something, John said. Charles's pulse kicked up. John's fingers gripped the edge of the pool a little tighter. That night, after the meet, I wasn't alone. Charles's chest went still. I hooked up with someone, John went on. Just once. From the rival team. Alex. Of course it was Alex. Of course it was someone hot and cocky and good with his hands. Charles looked away. Okay. It didn't mean anything. I wasn't thinking. You were thinking enough to go through with it. The words came out sharper than he meant. John flinched. Charles exhaled. Sorry. I'm not mad. I thought we were past hiding shit from each other. I didn't hide it to lie, John said. I hid it because I didn't want it to change this. Us. Charles met his eyes. It already did. Another pause. Another moment where things could have gone either way. Charles pulled himself up to sit on the edge of the pool, feet still in the water. John joined him, close enough that their shoulders brushed. I don't care that you hooked up with someone, Charles said after a beat. I care that it wasn't me. John turned his head slowly. What? Charles stared forward. I've wanted you for a long time, JJ. And I was okay keeping it quiet. Playing it cool. Just being the guy who always had your back. But then you looked at someone else the way I wanted you to look at me, and I realized I'm not okay anymore. John was silent. Tension curled between them like steam rising off wet skin. Then, why didn't you tell me? Charles laughed once, bitter and soft. Because you're you. Because you've got your shit together. Because I didn't want to be the reason you messed up your season. Your life. John turned to face him fully. What if you're the reason it finally makes sense? Charles froze. The air shifted again. Their thighs pressed together. John reached up and touched Charles's jaw, tentative at first, then firmer when Charles didn't flinch. Their lips met, soft, uncertain, tasting of chlorine and something deeper. It wasn't perfect. Their teeth bumped, and the tile dug into their hips. But it was real. Hot. Years of tension poured into one kiss that was quiet but hungry. John pulled away first, breathing hard. Charles just looked at him. Drenched, flushed, stunned. Then, you still thinking about Alex? John shook his head, eyes burning into his. No. I'm thinking about you. Chapter 5, The Confession. John barely slept. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling long after the pool lights had gone dark and Charles had walked home alone. His lips still tingled. His brain wouldn't shut up. He kept replaying it, the kiss. The way Charles looked at him, not just hungry but hurt. The way he said I've wanted you for a long time like it was a quiet truth he'd carried for years, one John had been too afraid, or too stupid, to notice. And now, what? He'd kissed Charles. Wanted it. Meant it. But the truth hadn't come out. Not all of it. Not the part that festered. The guilt was still there. Tangled up in his ribs. He couldn't shake it. Not until he told Charles everything. It was raining the next morning, a lazy, gray drizzle that matched John's mood. The team had the day off, coach's mercy after a brutal week. But John didn't want a break. He wanted clarity. He pulled on a hoodie and ran across campus, ignoring the wet cold and the puddles soaking his shoes. Charles's apartment was on the second floor of a cramped off-campus house. He'd only ever been there a few times, movie nights, late-night pizza, half-stone conversations that always felt like they came too close to something. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Louder. The door cracked open. Charles stood there shirtless in loose sweats, damp hair curling against his forehead, a toothbrush in his mouth. His eyes went wide. John exhaled. I need to talk. Charles looked at him for a second, hesitant, unreadable. Then he stepped back and opened the door. The place smelled like soap and bacon. John stood awkwardly in the middle of the room while Charles spat his toothpaste into the sink. Charles came back, drying his hands on a towel. Okay. Talk. I didn't tell you everything, John said, staring at the floor. About Alex. Charles folded his arms. John forced himself to meet his eyes. We didn't just hook up. I initiated it. I wanted escape. Distraction. I was thinking about you even while it was happening. Charles didn't move. John pushed on. It was selfish. I didn't understand what I felt, and I panicked. I thought maybe if I had something with someone else, I could push you out of my head. Silence. John laughed once, bitter. Didn't work. Obviously. Charles finally spoke. You think I'm mad that you hooked up with someone else? I think you should be. I'm mad, Charles said. But not for the reason you think. John's chest tightened. I'm mad because you didn't trust me enough to say you were scared, Charles said. I'm mad because you didn't let me be there. You've always let me be there, until it actually mattered. John stepped closer. I didn't know how to want you without messing it up. You already messed it up, Charles said, but his voice cracked. And you still have me. They stood there, a foot of space between them, hearts thudding in sync. I don't want to run from this anymore, John whispered. Charles took a step closer. So don't. Another step. They were chest to chest now. Barely breathing. You're allowed to want me, Charles murmured. You always were. John kissed him before he could lose his nerve. This one wasn't hesitant. It was deep and sure, fingers fisting in Charles's damp hair, Charles's arms locking around his waist. They stumbled backward, mouths crashing, hips grinding until Charles's knees hit the edge of the bed and they tumbled down in a tangle of limbs and wet heat. Clothes peeled away, slow and eager. It wasn't about sex, not yet. It was about need. Reassurance. The way Charles's mouth moved like he already knew this body. The way John kissed like he was trying to memorize the taste of forgiveness. They didn't say I love you. Not yet. But it hung in the air, waiting. When it was over, they lay tangled in the sheets, skin flushed and breathing slow. John rested his head against Charles's chest, fingers tracing the curve of his ribs. You're still mad at me? He asked softly. Charles kissed the top of his head. Yeah, he said. But I'm not going anywhere. Chapter 6, Butterfly Effect. By Tuesday, the locker room felt different. Not that anyone said anything, but Charles could feel it. Tension in the air. Glances that lingered too long. Whispers that stopped when he or John walked by. Swimmers weren't subtle, even the quiet ones. And the guys on their team? They noticed everything. Maybe it was the way John had been quieter than usual, or how they left the same room together that morning with their hair still wet and shirts slightly wrinkled. Or maybe it was just the way they kept catching each other's eyes during drills and pretending it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. Not anymore. Coach called out relay orders and Charles barely registered it. He was watching John, who hadn't met his gaze once all morning. Not during warm-up, not in the lane next to him, not even during their cool-down laps. The distance was back. After practice, Charles dropped onto the bench and peeled off his cap. His hair stuck to his forehead, and his chest still heaved from the last set. He tossed his goggles into his bag and sat still, waiting. Sure enough, John came up beside him, towel slung low around his hips, water dripping down his back. You good? John asked, soft. Charles kept his eyes on the floor. Are you? A long pause. I don't know. Charles stood, grabbing his shirt. Then we've got a problem. John flinched. Charles. No, he said, pulling his shirt over his head. You don't get to sleep with me and then shut down again. I told you I wasn't gonna play that game. I'm not shutting down. You're acting like nothing happened. Because if I act like it happened, I'm scared I'll fuck it up. Charles stepped closer. You already did, remember? John's eyes narrowed. So that's what this is now? Revenge? Charles clenched his jaw. No. This is me saying I'm tired of doing all the emotional heavy lifting. Another pause. Around them, the other swimmers filtered out, giving them space. No one said anything, but a few exchanged looks. One of the freshmen gave a weird half-smile before ducking into the showers. Charles caught it. He didn't like it. People are talking, he muttered. John's face hardened. Let them. Easy for you to say. What the hell does that mean? It means you're not the one they'll look at sideways, Charles snapped. You're golden boy John. You could fuck coach's daughter and still be team captain. I'm just the guy who smiled too long in the locker room. John stared at him. Hurt blooming behind his eyes. You really think I don't know what it's like to be judged? Charles didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was enough. That night, Charles sat alone in his apartment, fingers hovering over his phone, trying to will away the knot in his stomach. He'd always known things with John would be complicated. He just didn't expect to feel this exposed. He thought about the locker room looks. The questions that hadn't been asked yet. The way his teammates would joke with him but stop short when things got too personal. He wasn't ashamed. Not of being with John. But he wasn't used to being seen. A buzz from his phone broke the quiet. Text from John, I'm sorry. Can I come over? Just to talk. Charles stared at the screen. His thumb hovered. Then, he typed. Not tonight. He hit send. He didn't want to hurt him. He just wanted space. Time. To figure out if they were building something real or already watching it crack. Chapter 7, Under the Surface. He waited outside Charles's apartment for 15 minutes, staring at his own not tonight text like it was some kind of punishment. Rain soaked the back of his hoodie. His hands were shoved in his pockets. He thought about knocking anyway. He didn't. Instead, he walked. Through campus. Past the library. Down the empty quad lit by dull street lamps and the buzz of late-night silence. Everything felt too quiet now. His body wanted to move, wanted to swim, wanted to do something, but all he could feel was the ache of distance. He had blown it. Not with the hookup. Not even with the silence afterward. He blew it when Charles finally gave him everything, his honesty, his heart, that soft kiss under the pool lights, and John still backed away. Because deep down, he was scared of what it meant to want this. To be this. Out loud. And now, maybe it was too late. It was nearly midnight when the knock came. Charles sat up in bed, half asleep, shirtless, heart pounding. For a second he thought he imagined it. Then it came again. Soft. Hesitant. He got up, crossed the apartment barefoot, and opened the door. John stood there, hair wet from the rain, eyes exhausted, hoodie clinging to his chest. I couldn't go home, he said quietly. Charles didn't move. Just looked at him. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop thinking. About you. About what I said. About how much I keep getting in my own way. John's voice cracked. I'm not good at this. But I want to be. A pause. I want you. Charles stepped aside. John walked in. They didn't talk much after that. Not with words. John kissed him before the door even clicked shut, desperate, full of apologies, hands gripping Charles's face like he was afraid he'd disappear. Charles responded with equal heat, pulling John against him, tasting rain and fear and raw need. Clothes came off in messy handfuls. Shirts dropped to the floor. Pants peeled away. Skin on skin. They stumbled into the bedroom. John pushed Charles gently onto the bed and hovered over him, eyes searching. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Charles cupped his jaw. You're here. That's enough. Their mouths met again, slower this time. Softer. But no less urgent. John kissed him like he was finally allowed to. Charles pulled him closer, legs wrapped around his waist, guiding him down until they were pressed tight, bodies hot, breath staggered. "Tell me what you want," Charles murmured against his ear. "You," John said. "All of you." And he meant it. Every inch of Charles. Every heartbeat. Every hidden scar. The way they moved was different now, no more hesitation, no more hiding. John traced every line of Charles's chest, every freckle, every twitch of muscle under his tongue. Charles gasped when John's mouth moved lower, when his fingers explored deeper. They took their time. There was laughter between kisses. Moans muffled against damp sheets. The kind of touches that came from years of knowing someone, from friendship twisted into something far more intimate. When John finally pushed inside, Charles gripped his shoulders like he'd been waiting his whole life to feel that connection. It wasn't rushed. It was slow. Deep. Real. They moved in sync like they did in the water, measured, powerful, breathless. John held Charles's face, forehead pressed to his, and whispered his name like a vow. Charles came first, moaning into John's shoulder, body tensed and shaking. John followed soon after, buried deep inside him, whispering "Fuck, Charles," God as he let go. They collapsed into each other, sweaty and spent. Limbs tangled. Hearts racing. No words needed. Later, in the dark, John traced lazy circles on Charles's bare chest. "You okay?" he asked. Charles nodded. "Yeah." "You?" John rested his head there. Listened to the heartbeat under his ear. For the first time in a long time. "I think so." Charles kissed the top of his head. "Told you I've got you." John smiled against his skin. "And I've got you." Chapter 8, The Starting Block. Morning light spilled across the sheets like someone had poured it there. Charles blinked awake to the sound of even breathing beside him, warm skin pressed against his back, and the solid weight of John's arm draped lazily over his waist. They were naked, tangled, still slightly sticky with sweat and the remnants of the night before. And yet, Charles had never felt more at peace. John murmured something into his shoulder. Then stilled. "You awake?" Charles asked, voice thick with sleep. John's lips grazed his skin. "Unfortunately." Charles smiled, turning to face him. "Still feel okay?" John opened his eyes. Green. Soft. Bare. "Yeah," he said. "I do." There was no panic, no guilt, no masks between them this time. Just the quiet relief of finally. By the time they made it to campus, the sun was already high and unforgiving. They parted ways outside the aquatic center. John had a solo weights session, Charles had a meeting with Coach. But before John turned to leave, he grabbed Charles by the wrist. "Wait." Charles raised an eyebrow. John hesitated. Looked around. Then leaned in and kissed him. Right there. Outside the pool. Where anyone could see. It wasn't a full-on make-out. Just lips brushing lips. Quick. Real. Charles blinked. "Wow. You're being brave today." John gave a crooked smile. "Yeah, well. I'm tired of hiding the best thing in my life." Charles didn't say anything. Just kissed him again. This time, slower. Later that day, John crushed his time trial, nearly breaking his own backstroke record. Coach gave him a gruff pat on the shoulder and told him he was officially cleared for nationals. The team cheered, crowding around, slapping his back, tossing him a protein bar like it was a trophy. Charles watched from across the deck, arms folded, smiling like he already knew it was going to happen. John caught his eye. The noise around them faded. It was just them. When practice ended, Charles pulled him aside behind the bleachers. "Proud of you," he said. "You were in my head the whole time," John admitted. Charles smirked. "Is that a good thing?" "You kidding?" John leaned in. "It's the only reason I kept my shit together." Charles laughed. "You've got this." nationals, all of it. And when you do, we'll go to the beach. Like we said. I don't want to wait for some perfect moment anymore, John said. I just want to live it. Charles tilted his head. You trying to be poetic now? John shrugged. Maybe. They stood there in silence for a moment, fingers brushing. Then John said, so what are we now? Charles gave him a look. You, JJ, are officially my very hot, emotionally confused boyfriend. John grinned. I can live with that. They didn't come out with some big announcement. No declarations. No rainbows painted across the lockers. But people noticed. The way John started sitting a little closer. The way Charles stopped flirting with girls he wasn't into. The way their towels always ended up in the same pile. No one said anything bad. A couple of the guys smirked knowingly. One of the freshmen gave John a thumbs up. Another asked Charles if they could still room together or if it'd be awkward now. Charles rolled his eyes. Dude, I've seen your browser history. You've got bigger things to worry about. They both laughed. It was good. It was real. It was theirs. On a Friday afternoon, Charles posted a photo on his private Instagram. John, grinning, flushed, towel slung over his shoulder, fresh off a win. The caption read, proud of this one. More than he knows. He tagged John. Didn't care who saw. That night, they lay side by side in Charles's bed again, skin to skin, windows open to the sound of rain. Charles ran his fingers through John's hair and whispered, so. Ready for the starting block? John turned toward him, kissed his chest. Always.